In the studio is Brad White, Executive Director, MDOT. And good morning, Brad. How are you, sir? It's good to have you.
Good morning. Good to be here.
And I know you listen to this with a little bit even more attentive ear because spending some time in Washington and understanding that daily feedback of misinformation and disinformation is just, it makes you either go bald or gray or both.
Well, you can see what it did to me.
Well, both.
So it did both. Yeah.
So both of us. So there you are. All right, man. Boy, the sine die happened, and the legislative session is over. And I think the lieutenant governor, the speaker, and several other people who were with me look at this thing and say, man, this was an historic session that we got a lot accomplished. And the way it started out, you wondered if we're going to get anything accomplished. But your analysis of the just completed 2022.
Well, it was a very good session for us at the Department of Transportation, and I do believe it was probably the best session that the department has had in many years. As you know, we've got a $65 billion current investment in our system that we have to preserve and maintain. And then we have a list of needs that have been identified around the state of improvements in capacity projects that represent about $5 billion worth of needs. And with that, we had been running about a $1.2 billion annual budget for some time. So with the federal legislation that passed and with the aid that the legislature has given us this year, the commission's been able to revamp capacity projects. We're going to be able to make sure that inflation that has occurred does not slow down our paving program. In fact, I believe we'll be able to escalate it some and move some projects that we thought we would do in FY23 up a little bit. So it's been a very successful time. We're very appreciative to the listening ear that the legislature gave us. Overall, they gave us $40 million extra dollars that we can use to match what the feds will put up, $35 million extra dollars that's designated for the capacity projects that I was talking about, $45 million extra in paving that I was mentioning. But two of the most important things that they did for us that I'm most appreciative to is they didn't earmark up the department's bill. In other words, they didn't put any legislative edicts within our federal program, which will allow us to have the flexibility that we need in order to make the most use of what the USDOT makes available to us. And then in addition to that, they gave us the authority to realign salaries within the department, which was our number one priority due to the hemorrhaging of staff and the need for a capable staff. We can have all the money in the world, but without the human infrastructure to carry out our mission, I mean, it's all for nothing. So they checked every box for us.
MDOT over the last few years has really been hit by some engineers and people all up and down the line leaving to go get better jobs as the job market, especially under the Trump administration, was just red hot, and it hurt, I think, a lot of our agencies. So it's good to know that that's been bolstered. The other thing on this one too is, as far as letting new contracts. When will we start seeing that? I mean, all three commissioners have a big job now. They got to look and see which ones are in most need. But will we see that speed up rather quickly?
Yeah, I mean, we have by statute, the commission adopts a 3-year plan every year, and it recognizes or identifies what the paving needs are around the state, what the capacity needs that they're moving up the ladder toward doing all the construction work that's required in order to get them prepared for construction, along with safety and operational improvements and other things like that. So the commission had already adopted this plan. We had already designated revenue to go toward the plan to implement it. What this will allow is we were concerned that inflation was going to slow it down. This will take care of that and in many ways accelerate what we're doing. We'll have more projects that we can work to get ready for construction. We'll have more rehabilitation projects that we'll be able to do. And I don't know if you've seen a map of the 3-year plan, but I think the staff's done a wonderful job in that it represents, every county around the state and touches somebody in some way to try to make the improvements we need.
Is it evenly divided? That's probably a rhetorical question, but I'm sure it's going to be both repaving and new construction, or is the new construction put aside and waited for the repaving and restoration of the existing roads.
Well, we have federal benchmarks that we have to hit in regard to maintaining the current investment of the taxpayers. So it's going to have a lot of paving, a lot of safety projects, things of that nature. And for the last 10 years, the commission, or previous commission even, had more or less shelved a lot of the capacity needs due to lack of funds, so they could divert more money toward the rehabilitation, which we're required to do by the feds. So with the federal infrastructure bill that Senator Wicker helped us get, along with the money from the legislature, what you'll see happen now is us being able to turn once again to the capacity needs, get those projects ready for construction, which is going to take some time, but also be able to speed up all of the rehabilitation projects around the state that will help protect the investment. But as a footnote, it is important to note, as good as all of this is, and as much of a stride as this will allow us to make toward accomplishing our mission, keep in mind we're still maintaining a $65 billion investment with $5 billion worth of new capacity needs that have been identified. And our budget now, even though it's one of the larger ones we've ever had, is still going to be like $1.426 billion. So we're still having more needs than we've got revenue to take care of. So I'm hopeful that this is a step in the right direction that will result in conversations over the summer about how do we want to invest in our transportation system in the years going forward. What's the best way of making sure that we have reoccurring dollars that can protect the investment of the taxpayers? Because personally, and you and I have talked about this before, I don't think that the fuel tax, with the growth of electric vehicles, with the focus that automobile manufacturers as well as the federal government is putting on pushing our society towards that, I don't believe the fuel tax will be a sustainable form of revenue, and that's by and large what
sooner or later they're going to have to face that one way or the other. And I don't know how they compute this. We talked about this the other day. I'm not sure how they're going to compute this mathematically, but our gas tax is about 37 cents per gallon when you put the 18 and the 18 together. And somehow both the feds and local are going to have to come to some mileage counter in those vehicles that equates to about the same thing. And when that happens, there are going to be a lot of EV people are going to raise hell, because it's something that's going to, if they want to ride on that road sooner or later, they're going to have to pay for it.
Right.
And I'm not sure how that's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but at this clip, it's going to have to be addressed in the next few years. We've got more coming up with Brad White right after this. The one and only Brad White, who's executive director of MDOT. And I know there's a lot of decision to be made and everything else. What do you stand? Because I've always wondered this. You got people out there, as far as the engineers and everybody else, going out making sure we're getting our money's worth from these construction companies. The checks and balances now, making sure that money, because we have more than we've had in a while, is spent the right way. And I know that's part of what your responsibility is to the three commissioners. But how do you do that? I mean, it's a pretty big task.
Well, we've got a pretty good team that is very seasoned and that understands the federal programs. We work hand in glove with the Federal Highway Administration. All of these individuals spend day in and day out monitoring things, watching things, catching some mistakes, trying to correct things where they are, problems maybe. But by and large, we do a very good job at making sure that the taxpayers are getting full use of their money. And I think one of the best examples of that is we're one of the few states that nearing the end of every federal fiscal year, we receive, I can't remember the exact term for it, but a redistribution of federal funds that other states were awarded but failed to properly obligate. And so we're taking full advantage of all the money that is available to us through the Federal Highway Program. And then most every year we're also able to take advantage of some lost opportunities maybe that other states had. Yep. So we have a very good team that knows what they're doing, that monitors that and that watches that. But I think the biggest long-term savings that we're going to have is going to come from the legislature allowing us to realign our salaries, because what we will be able to do now is begin replenishing our workforce within the department to where we're not having to outsource as much work like inspections of projects and things like that we believe cost us in some instances 3 times what it would cost to have someone on staff that could do it ourselves. So I think in the long term, the legislature allowing us to take care of our people and readjust those salaries, I think will result in the taxpayers being able to be sure that more money is devoted back to the actual projects and the highways and bridges that we're trying to work on.
There's so many ancillary things, too. We talked about rest stops before. Is that going to be, some of those rest stops look like you're stepping into Elvis's jungle room. It's a little bit outdated. Others is litter control and things like that. I'm not sure if any of those dollars are going toward that.
Yeah, well, our maintenance program will be able to be picked up.
That's good.
Good. MDOT spends about $3 or $4 million a year on litter, which is atrocious.
Yep.
We were meeting yesterday looking at some of the welcome centers and rest areas around the state and the improvements that are needed there. As you mentioned, many of them are now getting several years old and are in need of either replacing or either at the very least upgrading a little bit. And we'll be looking at that and having conversations about how to best do that and move forward. So,
Brad, some of those ARPA funds is that just straight dollars, or are those matchable too? Once they come from the federal government, is that it, or can you match some of those too? How does that work?
Well, MDOT does not get any of the ARPA money because
they don't get. Okay,
ARPA was not. You weren't able to spend ARPA on what I would call traditional infrastructure, roads and bridges.
All right.
We could take part in ARPA from the standpoint of any lost revenue that we incurred. But by and large, ARPA, is my understanding, the legislature and the local governments are using that to look at more infrastructure needs from the standpoint of water and sewer and some other things like that.
Will this do anything for 49, or are we going to, as far as the extra money there?
Well, I was going to tell you, 49's already let and underway. I think we finished up the last part of construction that was on the main drag there in Richland, where 49 hooks into old 49, and we're getting to a point now where it's pretty much just a paving project. So all we need is warm, pretty weather, and we're going to have companies there that's one going one way and one going the other laying asphalt, and I expect it to be finished by this summer.
Any other projects that you want to mention that because we get a lot of people on C-Spire text line who want to know exactly about specific, but
they're going to be all over the state. I mean, from the rehabilitation standpoint, I mean, they're going to be in every county. Will be rehabilitating roads and putting this money to use to make sure that we're trying to maintain what we have. In the way of capacity, there's a lot of steps that have to go into seeing a project brought to construction that sometimes takes 2 or 3 years from right-of-way design, purchase of right-of-way, moving of utilities. So we've got several projects from North Mississippi down to the coast that we'll be working on trying to get ready for construction. I think, Highway 15 in Pontotoc County and Highway 57 down in Jackson County will be 2 that I think will be the ones that are closest to being let to construction. But there'll be others that are coming about all over the place.
The eminent domain bill that we signed into law, that doesn't affect the highway department?
No, it doesn't change anything for us.
There was something else I wanted to mention to you, and I forgot what it was, but for the most part, everything is moving on as it's supposed to be, and anything else any other bills in the legislature that affected the highway department?
No, like I said, we had a good session. I appreciated the open communication that the legislative leadership gave us. So we were able to stop legislation that would have had an unintended negative consequence for us, and we were able to work with them to try to align the resources and to maintain the flexibility we needed to administer the federal program. One thing I will mention to you before we go is MDOT crews will be closing a section of I-20 westbound and I-55 southbound at State Street, just on the other side of Pearl River.
That's in the capital city area.
This weekend, because of an issue we've got with a pipe that is about 35 feet underneath the roadway. So we'll be working on that, and they'll probably take up the course of the weekend to do. So we'll be rerouting traffic, around that area. So there's about 110,000 cars a day on average that go through that area. So it's going to be a pretty major issue for those having to drive through there, but this will help ensure that the road maintains a safe nature for those traveling and keep it from having any major problems. So that's something coming up.
So the value, because we have some people saying, well, you know, the MDOT gets a lot of money. It's never enough money. That's one of the C-Spire text line. Then you got so many other Highway 26, a washout. John from Vance, Mississippi said Greenwood to Webb is terrible. And then I could go on and on about people saying we have needs. But when you said $65 billion,
That's right.
as far as that value on what we have as far as our infrastructure in the state has to be maintained.
That's right. $65 billion that we have to maintain, and as anyone familiar with asphalt, I mean, it's the weather wears on it, so it's something that you have to stay on top of continually. And we have a team of people that works with Federal Highway that goes around every year, looking at all of this system, and then based on the resources we have, they prioritize what is in most dire need of attention, whether that be sealing or repaving or whatever. And it's something that, you're right, it seems like it's a never-ending process, and I think that's just going to be nature of the beast.
Is there anybody doing investing as far as private firms? We had talked about I remember it's been quite a few years ago, but there was some really talk about people. As a matter of fact, I think people were even to the point of having some here to discuss it in a more serious manner. A toll road on 49, adjacent to 49, and as I remember, this was an overseas company that was going to do that, but the economy kind of changed, and that was not a profitable venture. Right,
and to my knowledge, all of the organizations that have looked at toll roads around Mississippi, at the end of the day, the model didn't work out to be a good return on their investment as far as the amount of traffic we would have as opposed to a more populated
Number one,
state.
because of a rural type state.
That's
and
right.
just not enough traffic on there. Brad, always, sir, I appreciate it very, very much. I was a little surprised that nobody brought up this one as far as that $80 million from the lottery. That has been far, far more successful than anybody thought. And I was thinking that somebody's going to bring up either adjusting that number one way or the other, but that didn't come up, so everything stays the same.
That conversation has been going on. No action was taken, but I think that is something that we'll be talking about in the future, because I do think the lottery's been a lot more successful than what anyone gave it.
So maybe moving that up to $100 million or something like that, or
we would certainly take whatever they see fit to give us. But one thing would be immediately removing the cap on where we could continue getting at least the $80 million, from now on, because that money is directly going to two-lane highways rehabilitation.
You guys should have done that. You guys should have done that. Well, it was before you were here, but should have done that on a percentage basis. You'd have been better off. Hey. Hindsight's good. Always good talking to you, sir. Appreciate it very much. You're looking sharp, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.